Welcome to Left, East to West with me, Tom Parkin.
And me, Nikki Hill, asking a question of Tom. What is social democracy anyway? Is it a value set? Is it a critique? Is it a thing or a range of things?
Well, Nikki, I don't know, but we are going to sit down with somebody who has a lot of insight on that. It's Stefan Löfven. He's the former prime minister of one of the world's most fully developed social democracies, Sweden, to talk about the Nordic model. And central to that model is high union membership that makes workers
Mm.
social partners in the economy. And Mr. Löfven himself was a union president before he stepped into the role as the leader of the Social Democratic Party, and then prime minister, or a position he held for 7 years. So, kind of exciting interview. I think will give us some insights on, make us reflect on maybe, what are we trying to build? What does it look like? Um, Stefan is no longer the the prime minister. He's the president of the Party of European Socialists, which is the association of center left and left political parties across Europe, whether they're in the European Union or not. Includes British Labour Party, which, okay, let's not get into the debate about whether they're left. But
The
um,
rabbit hole.
yeah, that's for a different episode, I think.
And because of the time zone difference between Stockholm and Vancouver, this is Tom's interview.
Yeah.
We have some fantastic guests, though, coming up in Canadian time zones that let me get up on time coming soon. So, including Ontario NDP leader Merritt Stiles, we have economist Jim Stanford, and I have Saskatchewan NDP leader Carla Beck coming up. So, check out Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever you're listening to, tap that follow button so you get alerts when our episodes are up, and you'll see that new left, east to west in your feed. So we're going to have Stefan Löfven coming up. But first, this week below the fold, tracking a couple of important news stories that didn't make national headlines and that you might have missed. Listeners may recall seeing the Prime Minister at a Quebec graphite mine in mid May, or maybe not, which is why it's a below the fold story. It was a national story, but not a top story. The Prime Minister pitched it as a jobs announcement, said it showed the value and the quickness of the major projects office approval process, which has been a big headliner.
Yeah, it's been a major signature, really, for him. And we've often heard the refrain that kind of pairs up with this, that this is all about overcoming the Canadian disease of not being able to get major projects done. And it's all kind of not so subtle jab or dig at environmental laws and Indigenous consultation. That's kind of the rationale behind the Major Projects Office and its pair, the Bill 5, Mark Carney's Bill 5, which allows exemptions from environmental laws, occupational health and safety laws, and such, at projects in designated special economic zones. And all this gets managed by the new Major Projects Office. And Nikki, back on May 20, Mark Carney was at the Medawini graphite mine, which is about 130 kilometers north of Montreal, giving praise to his Major Projects Office. He said the MPO had approved what's going to be the largest graphite mine in the G7 and touted the quickness of the Major Projects Office approval, noting it had only been referred to the MPO a few months before, in November of 2025. And Nikki, that puzzled me because I knew somewhere back in my mind that I had read about this mine before,
Hmm.
and that it had been under construction some years ago. And so I thought, well, how could it be proceeding back then if it didn't have its environmental permits in place? So I looked back, and yes, indeedy, the Medawini mine did have the necessary permits. It got them on February 10th of 2021, more than 5 years ago. On that day, the mine owner, Nouveau Monde Graphite Inc., put out a press release saying they had all the required permits and were looking forward to starting construction in Q2 2021. But then the project stalled. The project didn't stall because of environmental laws that mean Canada can't get major projects done.
Mhm.
The problem was that it couldn't attract the investment, and cash is what the Major Project Office provided, not
Right.
permits. So in March, the Major Project Office poured $459 million into the mine from Export Development Canada and the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, public money. In April, The mining company raised a further 297 million from private equity placements bought by Eni, which is an energy company majority owned by the government of Italy. The Canada Growth Fund, which is a fund of the government of
Mhm.
Canada, and Investissement Quebec on behalf of the government of Quebec. So this is more public money with Italy now involved. Just after this $750 million of public money, the company raised 96 million in a public share offering, which I'm no expert on this, but it seemed to me to be kind of paltry compared to all
Mhm.
that public money. But the
Yeah.
PM says the project will eventually draw $1.8 billion in private investment. So I guess we'll see. So all this is pretty deep under the fold, but let's go one level deeper. The sudden interest in pumping public money into this mine is geopolitical. Graphite is needed for batteries, and about 2/3 of graphite is mined in China. A year ago, June 16 and 17, 2025, the G7 leaders met in Kananaskis, and they decided at that meeting to create the G7 Critical Minerals Production Alliance, backed with a commitment to use industrial policy where necessary to secure critical minerals like
Yeah.
graphite. So I think we all get what's going on here, and that this is a much larger discussion about Canada in the context of the U.S. China competition,
Mhm.
rivalry, geopolitics. But I think there's a couple of key points to reflect on outside of that. One, Prime Minister Carney is engaging in a bit of misdirection here. He said his major projects office and his Bill 5 were because we needed to end run environmental rules, and he was kind of suggesting that this quick approval was proof positive of the benefit of his MPO. But really what they just
Right.
did is mix in a bunch of cash. And that doesn't take an MPO, and that has nothing to do with the environment,
Mhm.
Indigenous consultation, or anything like that. So that was a bit of a misdirection. It's not about jobs. Not really. It's not about environmental red tape, not at all. And it's certainly not about elbows up, unless you mean elbows up against China. So the second point, I think, Carney and the G7 aren't leaving it to market forces to solve this access to critical minerals problem. They reshape markets, and they're deploying industrial policy to make sure that the access to these resources is secured. Again, we can put
Mhm.
aside the debate for a second about how and who gets control of them. But
Yeah.
I think the point here is, for me, Nikki, when it comes to questions like this, government gets its hands around the problem and makes sure it happens. But when it comes to our problems, like expensive housing, high food prices, 1.5 million people unemployed, carbon emissions, Carney says he'll leave it to the private market to solve the problem.
Mhm.
And that just makes me feel like we're less priority than
Mhm.
the global politic, and we're just kind of left to fend for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, graphite is in high demand, but it's interesting
Yeah.
after all that public money's poured in, who gets the graphite from that mine?
Yeah, I didn't look into that too much. It seemed to be a bit difficult. I assume that there are supply contracts in place. And I think we should be able to see those contracts because we
Mhm.
paid for the supply.
Yeah.
But I think this leads to a couple more questions about Mark Carney's resource development strategy. One, are we getting the best price when we sell this? Are Canadians getting
Mhm.
the best price back for our resources? And two, are these resources going for uses that strengthen Canada? Or is this really about strengthening the president of the United States who's threatening
Mhm.
Canada? That would be my worry. Anyway, the
Mhm.
supply agreements would help us understand that, and I think we should
Yeah.
see if we can dig to find them. Okay, now, Nikki, you've been updating us on the BC Conservative leadership race, and it's been pretty eventful, but now it's over. What can we expect
Thankfully.
from new BC Conservative leader Kerry-Lynne Findlay? And why should progressives outside of BC be paying attention?
Yeah, we definitely had a long leadership race for the BC
Hmm.
Conservatives, started in January, wrapped up on May 30th. And I think, it was also kind of a challenging time period overlapping with the legislature, overlapping with conversations about, we've talked about before on the show, about DRIPA.
Hmm.
And so it was actually like a pretty polarizing period of time in BC politics with all of these different dynamics going on at once and politics sort of coming into the fray on policy development too. But Kerry-Lynne Findlay won. She got 51% of the vote. It was a pretty tight vote. She edged out her nearest competitor, political commentator Carolyn Elliott, who got 49. They're actually pretty close, I think, when we
Hmm.
pulled the numbers in. And then there was a period where it wasn't really clear if former BC Liberal cabinet minister Ian Black was going to pull through with some votes. But in ranked ballots, how those votes fall, of course, is always really important. And they all continue to give Finley a lead on all four ballots. So it was very interesting. It was a little bit of it was a fast. They had a pretty good fluid voting system. We found out the results on each four ballots really quickly. Lots of, I think, modernization of their system, but it was pretty firm there all the way along for Kerry-Lynne Findlay. There was
Hmm.
a final slate with Findlay, Elliott, and Black, but also Yuri Fulmer and then Peter Millibar, who was the only sitting MLA that was running for the role and actually came in last, which was really interesting.
Yeah. Hmm.
So, yeah, and there were about six other candidates that, withdrew at different points, mostly throwing their support behind the ones that stayed in the race. So it was a very divisive race. We certainly, and actually, I think in the aftermath, if you spend too much time on social media, like I do watching it, it's still very divisive. I actually haven't
Yeah.
seen an aftermath of a leadership race like this in a while. It makes really striking how nice we are as New Democrats after a leadership race compared to what's going on in BC right now with the very public sniping at each other.
Yeah.
So quite a dynamic here. But and Finley, I think herself didn't shy away in any way from elevating a lot of those tensions in the race, particularly when it came to sort of this purity test concept for social conservatives and rejection of the sort of BC liberals, which is a chunk of this caucus and a chunk of the membership, and their being in the race and where the party wants to go to. Her platform was more freedom, less government, and then really about keeping the conservatives into this pure firmly social conservative party versus a larger tent that we tend to see here. And in the last couple of weeks, we see faith, family, freedom, really the big concept she's
Hmm.
talking about.
Hmm.
But she's not wasted any time stepping fully into the role of leader of the BC Conservatives. So kudos to her there. She's been out doing media. She's been really clear. Like I think as we get to know her and the public more, it is very clear to see that continuation of her campaign message, that value set, very populist, not a shift here. She, did things like head to Alberta in her
Hmm.
first week to do a fundraising event with Premier Danielle Smith.
Raise some
Really
eyebrows there.
out there, yeah, raise some
Yeah.
eyebrows. But I think again, showing us who she wants to be seen as that,
Hmm.
connection to values and connection to that movement that she's part of. And I think more eyebrows sort of raised recently too, where she posted an endorsement from Pierre Poilievre. So, some folks are like, why would you do that? He's down in the polls. What does that
Uh-huh.
signal? And I think for
Uh,
her, that is those signals of showing who her base is and who she's talking to as she tries to frame herself. The other interesting piece here, she brought in a chief of staff, Chris Delaney, who has a long history in the social conservative movement in BC, was at some point himself, about 2001, was trying to unite right-wing parties in BC under a BC Unity Party
uh-huh.
label. That didn't last super long, but he's been, appeared at different points. He's known for really kind of similar to where Finley's going, trying to keep the conservative in the Conservative Party of BC. He left
Hmm.
the BC Conservatives at some point because they were looking too much like the BC Liberals. He's very,
Okay.
again, sort of pure here. So as we look at this kind of big tent project that she has with a caucus that is made up of, conservatives, social conservatives, former BC United, BC Liberals, including former cabinet ministers, there's, I think, a lot of signals here about where she's going to continue to go, which is also having some ripples in BC politics. The
Hmm.
NDP's been trying to define her pretty quickly in terms of her background, of tying her to Trump, to MAGA values, and she's really pushing back here, trying to paint the BC NDP as extremists and ideologues already.
Right.
So, we're in for a really long couple years here, I think, in BC politics already. But she's sharp. I think a lot of people were surprised, but if you look at her record and sort of her depth within the conservative movement, she has been a minister of natural revenue under Stephen Harper. She's a lawyer. You can see that when she does interviews. You really can actually see her performing as a lawyer pretty clearly as she defines herself. And I think sort of creates the very blunt, very
Uh-huh.
upfront image that she's trying to portray as a leader right now.
Mm. Okay, so she's done some things, but she's not an MLA.
She's
She's
not an
been an
MLA.
MP.
Yeah,
She was elected,
yeah,
defeated again as an MP for South Surrey White Rock.
yeah.
Um, doesn't have a seat. So, uh, what's she going to do about what do you think happens there?
Yeah, it's kind of been the biggest question since her victory night because she
Mm,
has been clear she wants a seat. Sometimes
uh-huh.
leaders, will say they don't want a
Yeah.
seat for a while because they want to get out on tour. We've seen Abby Lewis see that federally, but she has said right away she wants a seat. So she's got this very unique dynamic where a seat exists within her household. Her
Right.
husband, Brent Chapman, was elected in 2024, controversial campaign of his own, where many were calling for his resignation because of racist statements. So she's indicated she plans to get a seat as soon as possible. She can't be the leader of the official opposition in the legislature without a seat, but we are
Uh-huh.
on break here on the session until October. So a lot of questions, of course, on if it's,
Uh-huh.
Brent Chapman that's going to need to step back or someone else. And Brent Chapman doesn't seem to be stepping back
Uh-huh.
right now. In fact,
Uh-huh.
even he has been had some health issues he's been in and out with. But also, I actually think all of a sudden he's a little bit more profile in community than we've seen him in a bit as well. So really, interesting kitchen table conversations going on, I bet. But
Uh-huh.
last time we
Uh-huh.
had in the BC Liberals had a seat when Christy Clark was elected and didn't have her own seat as
I've
leader.
forgotten that.
Someone did step back pretty
Right.
quickly and
Yeah.
then and got that seat back themselves when she found a new one. So, it's sort of the who's going to step back in the right
Uh-huh.
spot and is anyone going to step back
And
is really the dynamic.
And until then, I mean, she's got to get, well, she doesn't have to get paid, but I'm assuming she's getting paid, and that's
She's
a
getting
drain on the
paid.
party's resources. So,
Yeah, I think they announced about a $170,000
ah,
salary
nice.
recently, which, I think again, I've worked within the NDP when there's been
Yeah.
unelected leaders. They need to be able to do their jobs and have
Uh-huh.
some income while they're doing this, but they have found that filler and their fundraising's been
Uh-huh.
solid. So, the money's there to do it right now.
Uh-huh.
But she's got to get out because I think she did jump right away into one-on-one meetings with MLA. There's been caucus meetings that do have the benefit of the summer legislative break here. But I mean, I think that conversations with her own caucus have to be ongoing because there's all sorts of other things at play here as well in terms of how long, like, or if some of those former BC United folks stay within the caucus. There's a lot of
Uh-huh.
questions going on right now.
Uh-huh.
I think what's interesting though is, some people, I would say political watchers, sort of dismissing her a little bit too early here. And I think what we are seeing, we've
Uh-huh.
seen a few polls already that are really tight. BC polls are always really tight between the two main parties. It's not unusual to have that polarization. But I think that what we are seeing here is some of the regions in the province, very early days, of course. You've been a leader for a couple of weeks. Polls don't necessarily reflect what people know about you. But I think we are seeing some changes when we know younger people are, definitely more disenfranchised right now, seeing the struggle with housing, affordability, and jobs. That we are seeing some shifts in a couple of the early polls of young voters or voters in areas that have been sort of lower mainland traditional NDP strongholds would consider the conservatives. So really paying attention there, I think less on the conservative side and more to what voters are feeling about, current geopolitical pressures and what the impact is of that on their lives and how governments are responding. So I think like she has the ability, I think, and this is why she can't be underestimated, to have that very clear communication style that may actually speak to some of those young voters
Yeah.
who are feeling that pressure. That
Yeah.
being said, there was a new Leger poll that showed that 72% of people surveyed knew that there was a new BC Conservative leader, but only 26% had any familiarity with Kerry-Lynne Findlay. So she's got a big job
Mm,
to do there.
yeah. Well, there's nothing like a true believer can be very convincing. And she just
Yeah,
strikes me as like her convictions are not uh, s- tactical, they are bred in the bone kind of things. And
yeah,
people will find that appealing because, she's
yeah,
just talking the truth kind of stuff. And,
yeah.
BC's no, it's a lot from the East, but we like to watch BC politics because it's so fascinating. And things can change very dramatically. I mean, that's been the
Yeah,
history there. The Socreds crashing in with Vanderzam and then Christy Clark and her whole era. Um, so, we've had the BC NDP in power now for how many years? Nikki?
It'll be 10 next year.
10 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so they've run a long part here, and I mean, I guess between you and me, well, we want to see them rejuvenated and win again. But you know, there are other people, and if they
Yeah.
don't get what they want, then yeah, there's been this tradition of let's go to the right and let's let them run the place for a while. And
Yeah. Yes, we like to keep it definitely spicy here in BC
yeah,
politics, just to entertain all of you outside of BC. And I think this is the other dynamic that's going on here that
mm,
really watching is this swirling piece. So, when the Socreds and Vander Zalm and Christy Clark and Gordon
mm,
Campbell and
mm,
others
mm,
had long term, there was 16 years after the NDP lost in 2001, where there was a 16-year BC
yeah,
Liberal government. And I think but that was really formed as well with this united coalition of free enterprise, that being able to keep some of the conservative liberal base all together here. So cred same, it's always been this trying to keep these different parties which could form, because there could, there's still many types of
mhm,
right wing splinter parties that could happen. But really important in here is that former BC United, former BC United, former BC Liberal, but they are like traditional
yeah,
conservative federal liberal voters that I think in many cases did go to the BC NDP in the last election, because the Conservatives weren't the vehicle after BC United folded and handed over not only candidates but locked up, the party brand so no one could use it. And the only other
yeah,
entity was the BC Conservatives. So I think what's coming out of this leadership really quickly from some of these camps is, and more in the free enterprise side of that center right, is is this the time now to get something back that is that entity in the middle? And coincidentally, someone must have gone to had that question too, because there was a recent poll from Research Co. that was asking the public if they felt that there was an appetite for that center right new party in
mm,
BC. So I think it's like for those
right,
folks right now, it's kind of
yeah,
judging strategically, do they want to put like their money where their mouth is and decide this is the time that they could actually get something up and running. There's been the BC Liberal brand has been tossed around. There was a
yeah,
BC Liberal organizing meeting recently. The funny thing about the BC Liberal brand is it's also been tied up and locked in that safe by Kevin Falcon with the BC United
well,
brand, because it's connected
they,
legally still. So you'd
oh,
have
I
to
see, they still own the
still,
name.
yeah, because all they did was a rebrand, right? So in the elections,
Oh,
BC, yeah, so you can't just
fascinating.
kickstart, as far as I understand it. It's still very connected. You can't
Right.
re-kickstart that. But we do have Center BC here, which was started by former
Hmm.
BC United,
Hmm.
has an AGM coming up. So, we don't know really at this stage if the folks who are in that more former BC United federal liberal, federal conservative space are going to say, okay, let's give this a shot, or if they're
Yeah.
going to put all their juice into the
This.
newly Kerry-Lynne Findlay
Yeah.
party. So
This is fascinating to me because I mean, again, from far away, I was always kind of taught that, the BC, the Socreds, or then the BC Liberals, were federal conservatives and federal liberals working together under one,
yeah,
in one vehicle,
they
essentially.
happen. Yeah, a lot of the time.
And
Yeah.
this is not. This is not
No.
federal liberals and conservatives, federal conservatives working together. This is Polyev
Yeah.
conservatives and far right. That's a little rough, but
Yeah.
and right wing
Yeah.
conservatives, with the liberals left out of the equation now.
Yeah.
So this idea of reviving it to me is interesting, but also these are the folks that just folded up shop because everybody hated them just one election ago. And yet we see a poll that says that they could be a significant force, even though just, so recently people were like, this Kevin Falcon and this party is so bad, they should just go away.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me, because we see this in Ontario where we got a leaderless Liberal Party doing well in the polls. And it makes me think, people have this conception, but then when the reality comes along, when we really see um, Bonnie Crombie, when we really see Kevin Falcon, it becomes not so attractive anymore. We're
Yeah, and some of that I think too was, leader at the time. I think I always
yeah,
sort of describe the Kevin Falcon change as he just flipped the table because he got
Falcons,
sick of, the movement telling him his polls are bad and he needed to go, right? You're like, it's so instead
yeah,
of opening up a race, he went, fine, I'm out of here, and has locked
right,
it down for 2 years. So
yeah,
we're, it's going to be really interesting. And I think this is a big summer ahead for David
yep,
Eby and the NDP to do that, defining themselves as well, and really thinking about how to define
hmm,
Kerry-Lynne Findlay in the context of what voters are looking for, and where we see some of these shifts in voter sentiment, because we do have a
yeah,
long runway here. hopefully till
Hmm.
the next election,
Hmm.
even with just a slim majority. And it's
Hmm.
regrouping time on all sides, I think, this summer.
Yeah. And you're in Kelowna right now. I mean, that's where the NDP is having a caucus meeting over the next
Yeah,
couple of
I'm up
days,
in
over the
Kelowna.
weekend,
Yeah,
or
caucus retreat and then training weekend. Yes,
yeah.
that's the lovely view behind me is Kelowna. Yeah, so this is the
Yeah.
season for caucus retreats and bringing
Yeah.
people
Well,
together. So
chance for them to reflect on where they stand,
yeah,
and I suppose, and what and how they address both the public and the opposition, the new opposition leader that they face.
yeah, yeah. They're
Uh,
out touring in the last couple of days trying to do that. So an
yeah.
interesting weekend.
Yeah. Here's my only thought for, what it's worth is I know that New Democrats will want to sink their teeth into her identity politics or MAGA politics. And that's just such an obvious and enticing target. Um, and not that people shouldn't do that, but to not forget that what people want isn't just New Democrats attacking conservatives. They want jobs. They
Yeah,
want the rent to be decent. They want an affordable home, food prices, etc. And if the EB government, the NDP government, doesn't keep working on that, doesn't keep messaging on that, if she's not on that, if she's off on her MAGA trip, it won't matter because
yeah,
she won't need to have a plan for that kind of stuff because that's not the topic. So, I
yeah,
think still the NDP, in my opinion, has an advantage there on the economy if it can focus on those things that are
yeah,
everyday concerns to people and let her go and do her mega thing and throw the occasional punch in that direction, but
yeah.
mostly stay focused on, stick to your own knitting, NDP. That kind
Yeah, and
of
I would say I
thought.
was, up here in Kelowna Premier speaking last night, and I think
Uh-huh.
that was the heavy play here. They've been up here touring. They've been,
Oh,
doing announcements with forestry companies, housing, student
well, that's
housing,
good.
like going out and talking about the economic drivers in the community. They had the wine industry out for an event
Hmm.
last night. So I think,
Big
that's
supporter of
the
the wine
frame.
industry.
But yeah, yes, I enjoyed the wine industry being out last night. Yes, it's good.
Good.
But I think that is going to be the challenge is sticking into the message about what's going right because now you've
Yeah.
got a pretty strong competitor telling everybody what's going wrong.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Okay. All right. Well, a good story, and now into a next phase. So we'll see.
We're into the next phase, thankfully, because that was a long one we just had.
Yeah. All right. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with former Sweden Prime Minister Stefan Löfven. So, special international welcome to our left east to west guest today, Stefan Löfven. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. I really look forward to this.
Oh, great. Mr. Löfven, you got your start in politics at the age of, as I understand it, maybe about 23, when you were working as a welder and you were elected as a union rep. And in 2005, you became the national president of that same union, Industry Facket Metall, then the leader of the Social Democratic Party of Sweden in 2012, prime minister in 2014, serving until 2021 when you passed the torch to the next Social Democrat PM, Magdalena Andersson, and now president of the Party of European Socialists,
Mm.
an association of parties across Europe. And you're joining us today from Stockholm. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes, I
Yes.
am. Stockholm, yes. And let me also say that I enjoy doing this program also because it's from Canada. And I've always, we have a lot in common. Two countries far away
Yep.
geographically, but we do have also quite a lot in common.
I was I stumbled across the fact that 9% of Canada's surface area is fresh water,
Wow.
as is Sweden. So
Yes.
that's something I think culturally we must have together. And I'm wondering, do people like fishing and going into the forest and enjoying nature
Yes.
and northern, yeah,
Yes, people really love that. So a lot of people are out there in the forest or fishing or
yeah,
in the mountains or yeah, so that's
yeah,
very popular.
yeah. So a lot in common geostrategically as well.
Yeah.
We have neighbors sometimes that can be. We have a neighbor anyway who's giving us a hard time right now. We don't
If
need to
you
talk
put it
about
that
that.
way, yes.
um, how does your background coming from the labor movement shape your view about politics and the role of government? Is it common that Swedish Social Democrat MPs come from the labor movement?
Well, the last question first. We do have MPs with the background in the trade union. As trade unionists, you always want more of that. So and it has decreased over the years. If you compare to, let's say, 20, 30 years ago, it has decreased somewhat. But there is quite a number of people with that background. And I am convinced that your background plays a role also in your adult life. And of course, being a metal worker, a trade unionist, yes, of course, I brought thinking from those years and those experiences into the political life. Absolutely, the issue, the topic of employment, for example, has been since I know that that's so crucial for an individual that you can work, you earn your own money. It's a freedom issue, but it also a pride in that, but not only have a job, but a safe job, a good job. With fair wages and all that. Yes, of course, I had that with me when I joined politics. Absolutely.
Now, I think for most Canadians, when we think about social democracy or contrast it with liberalism or conservatism, they probably think about it as a distinct set of values or a set of policy choices or maybe an electoral base. And that could all be true. But what I think, Mr. Löfven, what I think you can really help us with is to help us see social democracy more concretely, to help us be clear in our understanding of, help us figure out what we are trying to build block by block. The model Sweden has pursued, you call the Nordic model, which has an organized labor market, sector-wide bargaining. Who are the Nordics? And can you describe this model for us a little bit, especially around the industrial relations?
Well, the Nordics, and as we also have a very close cooperation, both trade unions and social democratic parties, Iceland, Denmark, Norway, Finland, Sweden. And we do have similar policies, not 100% the same, but similar, built on the same pillars, you can say. And one of them being that the labor market parties have quite a free role, a big responsibility in the society. So politics has handed over that responsibility to the labor market parties, and that means that we have a participation from both employers and employees, trade unions, which I think is a very, very good way of developing the labor market, because the parties and the labor market knows so much more about the labor market than politicians do. So we have a basic legislation, yes, on workers' rights, on co-determination, and so on. But the actual activities are decided mainly from the employers and the employees. And then there's so let me anyway go back to the values that you said, because I think this connection is extremely important. That we our basic values are about the absolutely the equal value for all human beings. We're different as persons, thank God, but the value is the same. And that has to be expressed, in our view, in the society, meaning that equality is another value that is extremely important. And the only way we believe to reach equality is solidarity, that we help one another, so we give one another good chances in life. To be more concrete, it means that children, all children in a public health care system need to be taken well care of from the very beginning. And of course, the mothers, the maternity care and health care and daycare, but also schools, because if you mean something with equal value, you also need to give all children the best possible start. That should not be a thing only for those who can afford a good school. So
Hmm.
we pay taxes into the system, and we discuss how to use these taxes. One of the things that we use them for is schools, so that every child has the best possible chance to reach an adult life as a free and strong individual. But also the public health care, another thing, social insurances. If you're sick, if you're unemployed for a while, you need to make sure that you can handle that and pay the daily costs, the food and the rent and everything. Because if you don't, that will affect the individual, but it will also affect the economy in the country, because it will affect the consumption, the possibility to consume.
Hmm.
So it goes hand in hand that believing, including everybody, I would say, is the key. If you include everybody in the labor market, in schools, and in the society, it's good for everybody individually, but it also builds a stronger, more resilient society. And so going from the values to the very concrete things in healthcare or school or pension system or whatever, is that connection is extremely important.
Hmm. Good for the individual, good for the group. That's a interesting way of
Mm.
looking at it and expressing it. And also the way that your labor market is organized. Well, in Canada, about 33 or 35% of people are members of a trade union, but it's much, much higher in the Nordics.
Mhm.
So the labor movement can speak for almost everybody.
Mhm. Yes, so organizing is of course crucial, and we have seen also here a slight decrease in
Hmm.
the percentage, but still it's very high, 75, 80%, depending on what union you look at, but in general. So yeah, there is an incentive for people to be part of the union, because the union has so much important tasks to fulfill. And that is also because the society, as I said earlier, politics gave the social partners their tasks, and that would also mean that the trade union is participating in co-determination, is active in the unemployment funds, for example. They're also
Hmm.
paying into these funds. The government is
Hmm.
paying, but the individuals are paying. So the trade union are also active in these unemployment funds. So the
Yeah.
more the trade union can do, the more incentives also for individuals to actually join.
And
Except, of course, I mean, the wage negotiations are crucial. Yes, but I think if trade unions are given a real important role in society, I think more people would join.
mm. Now, in the Nordic model, we tend to have site by site collective bargaining, and the Nordic model is quite a bit different. I understand that you have national level bargaining, sectoral bargaining, and local bargaining. How
Yes.
does that work? You were a president of a national union, so what kind of things would you do at your level versus different sectors within your union or individual workplaces?
Yeah, we negotiate at the national level. So we
Hmm.
sometimes we coordinate among the blue collar trade unions. But we negotiate separately, but we coordinate our demands.
Hmm.
Um, and some 30 years ago now, we introduced a new system, because we had decades where the wage increases were quite high, also, I mean, nominally quite high in kronor, in the Swedish currency. But we noticed after when the year was over, nothing was left because of inflation,
Mm.
meaning that the wage increase was not met by productivity.
Right.
And that also meant that the sectors, the manufacturing industry, as an example, that are exposed to international competition, had problems because the companies needed to raise prices and lost competition.
Hmm.
So a new system was introduced where the sectors that are exposed to international competition decide how much can we afford in wage increase, and the rest of the sectors have to follow that.
Hmm.
Still with the flexibility of doing special things for, let's say, low wage people in other sectors, yes, you can do that. But in general, to stick to that, and that has given real wage increase, I would say, ever since 1996, 7 until
Hmm.
now, almost every year. And I think there are few countries that can see that kind of real wage increase as we have actually managed with this kind of structure.
So at the national level, led by the blue collar trade unions, there's a framework or a guideline about wage increase, and others follow that policy in their local bargaining.
Yes, yes, and
Interesting.
then so that's the national. Then
Yep.
the locals, they can still negotiate, so they can negotiate higher if they. I mean, some do
Hmm.
because they can. The companies do well. They can do by wage increase or by in other forms, of course. So they have their freedom of negotiating. But when they start negotiate, they have this national level as a ground. So that's the minimum, and then they can distribute money differently, wage
Hmm.
increases differently, they can increase locally and so on. But it's a national kind of a guarantee. At
Hmm.
least this you are entitled to.
And at the national level, you're also bargaining things like your unemployment insurance scheme, uh, contributions, and management of the fund. That sort of thing, or and other
Uh,
social benefits.
Not the unemployment, because that is
Uh-huh.
a separate body. The whole that is also financed by government, and
Hmm.
so that's a separate body. But we do, I mean, we do negotiate insurances, for example, working hours,
Right.
safety, and pension, and so there's a lot of subjects in those agreements.
Yeah. Interesting. Now you talked about the era when you had high wage growth, but also high inflation. It was affecting your exports. I think this is probably something Canadians, we're a very export-oriented economy as well. So it's something we can relate to. Now, do you think that the fact that you have an organized labor market gave this potential for a wage stability that allowed for containing inflation, and then to in effect create wage gains that were more long term, more sustainable, more stable, more real, so that there's the old idea that unemployment, there's a trade-off between unemployment and inflation, that in the organized labor market of the Nordics, that trade-off is a lot smaller, perhaps.
There is a trade-off, I'm convinced, because with high percentage membership, um, you can discuss this. You can have the dialogue with a lot of workers, employees.
Hmm.
If with a lower percentage, you don't reach that many people. So I would say it means something that because I mean, that's crucial in a trade union, that you can meet people, you can have that dialogue, you can receive criticism when they feel like that, but you can also explain and show this is how we're thinking. And at the time we got that mandate, people were tired of these relatively high wage increases, but also high inflation. So we could make sense of that, and having very broad dialogue within our, I mean, in our example, within our
Hmm.
trade union, and meet
Hmm.
people out there at their workplaces in the regions and discuss. So yes, I would say
Interesting.
it means something.
So almost a national discussion within the labor movement
Indeed.
about wages and inflation and exports and the strength of the Now, how that's an enormous social project.
Yes, it is. But and then again, local trade union representatives
Mhm.
exposed to competition, foreign competition, I mean, they saw this. They saw what
Yeah.
happened, so they could relate to it. Okay,
Right.
we see this is not good. So they could also add to that discussion. And but again, I think it means something that you have members that you can reach out to, and they can reach out to their
Mhm.
representatives. So that connection is extremely important.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned the social partners, and that's not a term that we use in Canada. We don't have that. Could you just explain what you mean by that term, and who are the social partners? What decision do these partners make? And is that social partnership, how dependent is that something that only happens when the Social Democrats are in power, or is that sort of a feature that continues whether the Social Democrats are in or out?
Yeah, it continues.
Mm,
It's I can say it's tougher for trade unions with right-wing governments because they tend to always, as an example, lower the payment from unemployment funds, as an
mm,
example. So and that of course affects the labor market and workers. So they're trying to do that. And every time we are in power, we correct that and raise those. So it's tougher with conservative governments, no doubt about it. But they have another philosophy. That's obvious.
right.
But it's still, I mean, it works. The system between the partners works. So it's the employers and their organizations and the trade union and our organizations. So as I said, we are given quite a lot of responsibility in the labor market. But also that includes the enterprises development. So with the
Hmm.
co-determination law, as an example, the employers are obliged to inform the trade union representatives about constantly about the development of the enterprise, the company, how is it doing, the economy, sales, you know, and changes within the company. When we want to restructure this enterprise, they have to first inform and then negotiate, meaning that trade unions workers, they come in, they participate also in, let's say, a restructuring of the enterprise.
Hmm.
And from the beginning, many business leaders were not happy with this.
Hmm.
We're back now in the 70s, but over the years, many of them say, "Hey, this is very good." Because we get some very good ideas from workers. They know their job, and they can see other things perhaps than the CEO does or the CFO. So many of the business leaders today say this is good, and
Hmm.
the workers also have a right to be in the company board, the enterprise's actual board
Hmm.
with representatives. And I've heard also their business leaders saying, "Hey, now I can hear things that I can't hear from
Right.
from the
From
people in
my
the office. They don't
from
say this, but these guys they do."
right.
So it's a kind of a. I mean, there's still this basic conflict between labor and capital is there, but in doing this, we found a way of dealing with it the best way we think we can.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we also remember, not personally, but we do know the history that from the industrialization started in late 1800s until 1930, 40, with hard battles in Swedish labor market, strikes, conflicts. But then 1938, they sat down at the central level, national level, said, no, we can't go on like this. We have to find a way of dealing with this basic conflict. And that's what happened. So few days with conflict on the Swedish labor market.
Interesting. Do the social partners, labor and capital, do they have a role in um, deciding about what private or public sector investments are made in the economy, or uh, how they're directed, where they're directed, what sectors, what kind of businesses?
I would say both of them are also influencing politics.
Mhm.
So there, not only, I mean, that I guess happens all over the world, but this
Yes.
is different, I would say. When I was prime minister, we invited the trade unions and the employers organizations. For example, before we had discussions in the European Union that we knew affected the labor market, we we invited them and sat down with them and said, hey, this is the issues that we're going to deal with. These are the problems. These are the opportunities. Let's hear your view and
Mm.
try to use that. And also as a politician, as a political leader, of course, it's a strength when you know
Yes.
that the final decision you make, the things you push for, are supported by the partners of the labor market. And of course, they try to influence also political investments. At the company level, definitely trade unions also push for investment because they want to keep the enterprise as competitive as possible. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it
Yeah.
works well.
And some of the well, the Nordic model has developed some of the world's most innovative and productive economies. I was looking at some OECD reports from 2025 that put Sweden's productivity higher than Canada,
Mm.
higher than the European average. What advantages do I think you started this exploration, but what are some of the other advantages this Nordic social democratic model has in skills, in productivity, and especially in innovation?
Mm.
And how do you connect that back to workers in a store, in a plant, in a school, um, that are doing their job, but
Mm.
there's always change, and to be a participant in change and beneficiary of change.
Yeah, so first make use of the competence, and I still criticize business leaders, and I tell them, hey, although we have quite a good of co-determination, Swedish enterprises, I think you make use of, let's say, 50% of the knowledge that people have, so you can
Mhm.
improve a lot, but relatively more than many countries. And when I was active in the trade union, I could see traveling to England or to Germany or other Japan, I could see there are more layers between the CEO and the worker, individual workers. So let's say 6, 7. In Sweden, we have perhaps 3. And that makes the workers more, there are more possibilities to influence, to come up with ideas and tell this is how we can improve the process, a machine or whatever. And they do, and they know that if we don't, if we you have to be on your toes, otherwise you
Yeah.
can't cope with the competition, and it's hard. And also remembering that Sweden, the Swedish export is about 50% of our GDP, 50,
Mhm.
meaning that a lot of the wealth that we build is export. And it goes without saying that in that light, you need to be very competitive. But
Yes.
also, the other side of it is, and this is very important, when when things changes, you restructure a company, perhaps meaning that a number of people get unemployed or being laid off. In that moment, people need to know again, I will, it's okay. I can handle the economy until I get the next job.
Mhm.
If not, they will resist the change. So countries with low unemployment fund or low insurances,
Yeah.
they I would say they will meet more resistance in the change because people are afraid of the change. This is bad enough anyhow, being laid off. But at least one thing, I can handle the economy still. I can keep our house. We can stay in the house. And the second is the society helps me finding another job with an active labor market policy, training, whatever you need to find that next job.
Yeah, and there is a fairly active skills training initiative that is helping people get reintroduced into workplaces when they're unemployed. I've read a little bit about this, but I'm not sure. I mean, I won't have the level of knowledge that certainly you can help us with. How do you how does the state use its resources to get people from unemployment into companies and help the companies find the skills that they need?
So the school system is of course the base, where you want to give you give the kids and the youth the best possible basic education. And
Hmm.
then, of course, university and all that, but also labor market training, different skills. Be it welding, I was a welder, welding or driving a truck or whatever you choose to do. So the society's task is to make sure the society can provide that training. So a part of the budget of the state budget is allocated to this kind, so to make it easier to cope with these changes on the labor market.
Hmm.
Now we criticize this government because they have reduced it. It's not
Hmm.
smart. We have to make sure again that people can find the path to a new job, but also the labor market partners are also involved in this. So when I worked in the trade union, and they still do, we developed something called technology college between the parties, because again, the employers and the trade unions, the employees, they know very well what kind of training people
They
need.
need, yeah.
So we developed training together, this technology college that is now all over the country. And in different sectors, both parties are involved in shaping the training so that they know, youth know that with this training, I'll get the right skill. And the employers know those who have gone in that kind of training, that kind of education, they have the right skill. So
Right.
it's another example of giving the social partners a task, a very important task, and freedom to shape this, because we think it's better.
Hmm. So I imagine for a lot of Canadian Social Democrats, this all sounds incredible and wonderful, and let's just do that. But there is one caution or flag. All the Nordics, um, they're unitary states. They don't have provinces. They don't have states. We are a federation of 10 provinces and 3 territories with different levels of responsibility in different jurisdictions. The labor market is generally the laws are set out provincially. Provinces and our federal government make investments. Our federal government runs our unemployment insurance fund, our Canada Pension Fund, etc. It's more of a mix.
Mm.
But with your experience working with federations, um, and your viewpoint on them, do you think there's a way around that for Social Democrats working in a federal arrangement?
I do. I mean, Sweden is a member of the European Union, and
Uh-huh.
so we have the same kind of discussion there, because the European Union has no mandate, let's say, on the social issues. That's not a European Union mandate; it's national. But a number of years ago, I was one of them initiating what we called a social pillar. So we started a discussion with the Commission President at the time, Jean-Claude Juncker, saying, "Hey, European Union must be more than for just capital or goods and all that. People must feel this is good for me."
Uh-huh.
So and we do want to raise the social security for people so that they feel, yeah, we can cope with, because we want also to make the European Union more efficient, more productive, and with that comes demands for workers. So, but given that it's not a European mandate, we said let's go for if we can decide what we want to achieve in terms of employment, in terms of what kind of jobs there is, and what happens if you can't job. Three topics, and recognize, okay, this is not something that we can decide for whole Europe, but we can decide that all of us will walk to a certain path. We want to increase employment. We want to do that and that and that. And you do it your way, I do it my way, and he or she does it her way. So that's a way of combining, you said, and right now we have a new topic at the European level that is not a European Union mandate, it's housing. But we see all over Europe that a lack of a housing, and youth are forced to stay home with their parents because they can't find an apartment. And that is not a European mandate, but our party, the European Socialists, we've said that, hey, this is a subject that we need to deal with, all of us. So let's find a way also here to combine our forces, but it's a national decision, but we do it together, so it becomes a European issue anyway. I think that's one way. And let me just say again that although you say it sounds good what we do in Sweden, I just want to say it's not perfect. It's far from perfect. We have our share of problems, but I think the basic model is good.
Final question. Just going back to your life as a union leader and thinking about people who are union leaders here in Canada, I think the experience is the same in many ways. What are your thoughts on how to be a leader, to build support for unions within the membership? What worked for you or didn't, to bring union members along?
The crucial thing is presence, to be close. At the local level, I spent a lot of time walking around on the floor, so to speak, and talk to people and inform people. When this co-determination legislation was implemented in the 70s, we found out after a time there's a risk that trade union representatives, they sit with the leaders, with the CEO or whoever it is, they get a lot of information. But if you don't share that, the members after a while, they sit and talk, but we don't know what's happening. So presence is extremely important. At the national level, we introduced once a year we gathered quite small groups, 10, 15, 20 people, workers, some there were representatives, some were not, but they were at a very local level, and we sat down for a day discussing, could be wages, but could be anything that we wanted to discuss with them, and that creates inclusion. So presence and inclusion, I think, is extremely important, and even in tough times, you just have to go there, you have to be there, and I think that also gives respect if people see that you're not afraid to be there, or even though they are really criticizing you very tough, but you're there, and you take that criticism and you deal with it. So I would say again, presence and inclusion is absolutely crucial.
Well, that's some good advice. Mr. Löfven, thank you so much for taking time with us.
Sure.
And helping us on this project of trying to imagine for Canadian Social Democrats what a social democratic building process could look like. And I know that we can probably reflect on that a lot more clearly and concretely now with your help. So
I
greatly
hope I've
appreciated.
contributed to some extent.
Yes, thanks very much. We're going
Thank
to take
you.
a quick break, and we'll be right back with Nikki and Love It or Leave It.
Before we wrap up, we've come to the part of the show we like to call Love It or Heave It, something you love and want to keep, or something you'd like to heave and to forget forever. What do you have this week, Tom?
Well, I'm heaving the $2.2 billion HST rebate on new housing purchases by investors in Ontario. This is another partnership deal between Mark Carney and Doug Ford. And knocking off 13% HST for the purchase price of a new house or condo is great for, an individual who's looking for a place and wants to live in it. But my concern here is that this HST rebate isn't limited to owner-occupiers. It's also getting extended to investor speculators. And there are some housing experts who are raising the concern that this is going to reignite the increase in housing prices and rents. So
Yeah.
for the past 10 years, 57% of new condos and 23% of new house purchases in Ontario were for owner investment, not for owner occupancy, according to research by Jeremy Withers, a researcher with the New Housing Alternatives at the University of Toronto. So right off, a big chunk of that $2.2 billion is going to flow to investors, not the people that Mark Carney and Doug Ford want you to picture in your head when they think about, the first-time home buyer or the home buyer who's going to live in the house. That's who they keep trying to draw. But no, a lot of this money is going to go to investors. And as Jeremy Withers points out, this effect is really problematic because if they juice the real estate returns by cutting this, by giving this HST rebate, the inflow of capital will very likely start pushing up house prices. So, for example, just to think about the simple math and how this works, 13% HST on a $1 million house or condo is $130,000. So if in a few years the investor sells it for $1.2 million, the return after the tax is $70,000 or 7%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But without the HST, it's $200,000 or 20%. So it really changes the finance math and the investment return. So the plan from Ford and Carney is about attracting investors as a way to restart construction, but at the cost of higher prices. And that is what I am heaving. And I think from what I'm reading, and people like Jeremy Withers and others who are expert in the field, that there are better ways to address the construction problem that don't fuel housing inflation, and that's something I want to dig into and give some love to in the next few months.
Yeah.
What about you, Nikki? What are you seeing? Something
Well,
loving, something heaving.
listeners who know me well will be surprised I'm dipping back into sports ball again. But it is
The
FIFA
sports
madness
ball.
in Vancouver and other Canadian cities, and probably all over my feed. So from other across the world. So let's do it. I'm not a big fan of the big sporting events; they're not my thing, and some of the pressures they put on communities in particular. But I am a fan of sport organizations that invest in women's sports. So I'm going to give FIFA some credit here before I probably curse them for the next month or so when I can't get downtown for events. But they launched a female health and performance project recently. So I think something people just don't understand is that there is always been this really big gap in health research in general with gender gaps. And so most research in health and including in shaping recovery and training has been built on male data, even for women, built on male data. And there was a timely meme going around my group chats where lately what someone had up on Instagram that was saying to people, did you know that Home Alone 2 is now older than the first policy requiring women to be included in clinical trials? So just for those needing to track how old Home Alone 2 is, 1993 was the first time that women's data was required in clinical trials. So this is why it's still really important that organizations like FIFA are putting some money into what was still really innovative work, sadly, here in 2026. They did a review that showed on 5,000 sports science studies published between 2014 and 2020, only 34% of participants were female and only 6% focused exclusively on women. So this is, great to see from FIFA. Their chief women's football officer said, we need to normalize these conversations around female health and embrace this, use it to our advantage instead of ignoring it and be fearful of discussing it. It's not a weakness, it's a strength. So, also a fan favorite for me, trying to address here in this work issues around support for menopause, menstruation. So, good on FIFA. There we go. Probably the only nice thing I'll say about FIFA for the next little bit, unless I pop over to a good concert in Vancouver. And so much chaos going on in the city. And if you don't cave to pressure from Trump around trans athletes, there'll be more good things to say. If that matters to FIFA, how I'm feeling about them.
Yes. Well, FIFA madness has descended on Toronto as well. And yeah, it's
Yes.
crazy. But, I hope the people who work in the restaurants and bars are getting extra shifts and making money. And that's just,
Yeah.
I mean, the decision's been made long ago to have this, so I hope now at this point that it just works out and everybody has a good time and
Yeah.
enjoy the sport. Even you, Nikki.
I will happily stay in the suburbs and enjoy it.
All right. Okay, well, you heard from Nikki and me. You can email us at lefteasttowest@gmail.com if you want to tell us about something that you're loving or heaving. And also remember to tap the follow button on your podcast player because you want to get reminders for those upcoming interviews with Ontario NDP leader Marit Stiles, economist Jim Stanford, and Carla Beck, the leader of the Saskatchewan NDP, all coming up the next few weeks, and then we'll tell you about who we're looking into July and further on. So thanks for joining. Have a great week, Nikki.
Bye, Tom.
Okay, take care.
Thanks for joining Left East to West with hosts Nikki Hill and Tom Parkin. We'd love to hear your comments, ratings, follows, and shares. It helps people find us. To become a Left East to West community member and to help us reach even more Canadians, subscribe using the link in the show notes. You can watch us on YouTube or listen wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Just search for Left East to West and subscribe. I'm Doug Hamilton signing off for Left East to West. We'll see you next week.